Hello, welcome to Talking the Secret Doctrine. My name is Dr. Don Franklin Shepherd, and today we will be continuing our study of the third part of the first volume of H.P. Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine. Once again, we'll be using H.P. Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine, published by Theosophical University Press, located out at Pasadena, California. In particular, I want to look at pages 588 and 589 today, dealing with the nebula and the nebular theory. This is what H.P. Blavatsky writes in paragraph number 3 on page 588. The nebula exist, yet the nebular theory is wrong. A nebula exists in a state of entire elemental dissociation. It is gaseous and something else besides, which can hardly be connected with gases, as known to physical science, and it is self-luminous. The way that I like to look at this subject is I think of a comet that flies through space and it finds its own particular area in space. In finding its own particular area in space, it goes through its localized evolutionary journey within that space. It gradually materializes, gradually concretizes, it becomes light as we know it, it accretes other cometary matter around it, until that original comet either becomes a central sun or that original comet becomes a solar sun. And then we have a solar universe or a universal solar system as we understand them in the Secret Doctrine. Now, H.P. Blavatsky says that these nebulae exist in a state of entire elemental disassociation. That is because this is happening before the dawn of time, so to say. That is, they exist in states pre-time. They exist in states pre-cosmos. And it is that comet that brings the cosmos into existence as we understand it. It's gaseous, yes, but it's something else, which can hardly be connected with gases, and it's self-luminous. So the way I like to look at this is I like to look at this in terms, figuratively, of the sixth, fifth, and fourth layers of the mundane egg. I like to draw an analogy between this gaseous nature of this cometary matter and the fourth layer of the mundane egg. The ones that we're still capable of envisioning and seeing. The fifth, obviously, it exists of something else because the fifth layer of the mundane egg corresponds to mind, or in this case, it corresponds to spirit energy or the gods. The sixth stage corresponds to a deity. We can draw an analogy to a deity. So when I look at this passage, and I think of this cometary matter coming into the mundane egg and settling and following its evolutionary journey, I like to think of the sixth layer of the mundane egg, a deity as the backdrop of space. And within this backdrop of space, the spirit energy consciousness of the gods comes alive. And the fourth stage then, this gaseous matter, more which we're familiar with, corresponds to the solar sun. So we have the solar sun as a monad, and we have this fifth layer of the mundane egg, the spirit energy is the gods, and we have the monad and the gods all residing within a deity, the great cosmic space. Sixth, fifth, fourth layers of the mundane egg. And if we drop it down from the fourth layer to the third, the second, and the first, we then get the atoms. And we have the complete picture, gods, monads, and atoms. Well, let's go ahead and continue over on page 589. The many objections raised against the homogeneity of original diffuse matter on the ground of the uniformity in the composition of the fixed stars by some opponents of the modern nebular theory do not affect the question of that homogeneity at all, but only the said theory. So the point here is that the backdrop for the gods and for the monads, the backdrop for the solar suns and for the spirit consciousness working through them is a deity. And a deity is, in the mundane egg, corresponding to Mula Prakriti, and it's homogeneous. So Blavatsky's understanding that the gods and the monads are coming out of a deity, the homogeneity of this dark unknown of cosmic space. She continues, Our solar nebula may not be completely homogeneous, no, because the solar nebula would correspond to the fourth layer from one perspective with the gaseous comet, and the fifth layer with the gods, that's something else unknown. So no, they're not quite homogeneous. We have to go up to a deity. We have to look to the backdrop in which they're settling in to find the homogeneity. Our solar nebula may not be completely homogeneous, or rather, it may fail to reveal itself as such to the astronomers and yet be de facto homogeneous. The stars do differ in their constituent materials, the stars being the gods in this case, and even exist elements quite unknown on Earth. Nevertheless, this does not affect the point that primeval matter, as it appeared even in its first differentiation from its Laya condition, because remember, we have a Laya center, we have that transition point, and it's that transition point as various grades of substance are coming out of it that cause the rotation, that cause the comet to fly through, cause the rotation, cause everything to settle into their particular solar systems in a circular motion. Is yet to this day homogeneous at immense distances, in the depths of infinitude, and likewise at points not far removed from the outskirts of our solar system. Now, H.P. Blavatsky mentions a place in Kant. I've always preferred Kant, Immanuel Kant's Universal Natural History in Theory of the Heavens, because it was Kant who did tremendous work in establishing the concept of the nebular theory. And I think it merits reading a passage in Kant just to see how similar Kant's writings are to the secret doctrine. On page 45, this is what he writes. Thus, if a point is found in a very large space, the point being the comet, the very large space being a deity, where the power of attraction of the elements located there exerts a stronger influence than at any other points around it, that's because that point is either going to be a central sun in its cometary form, or it's going to be a solar sun in its cometary form. Then the basic material stuff of elementary particles spread out in all the surrounding area will sink toward this point. That is, will gradually accrete lesser bodies circulating around it. For example, the solar sun will attract the planets. The first effect of this general sinking is the development of a body at this midpoint of the attraction, which, so to speak, proceeds to grow from an infinitely small seed in rapid stages. But as this mass increases, it will, in exactly the same proportion, with its more powerful force, move the surrounding particles to unite with it. This is where we have H.P. Blavatsky's diffuse elements, and then gradually concretizing, gradually materializing. This is where we have the change in size of the various planetary bodies happening over time. When the mass of this central body has grown so extensive that the velocity with which it draws the small particles to itself from great distances is diverted sideways by the weak level of the force of repulsion with which these particles interfere with one another, it produces lateral movements, which, thanks to the centrifugal force, are such that they can move in a circle around the central body being the sun, that which moves around them being the planets. Thus, large vortexes of small particles develop. The vortexes here in Kant basically is theosophical magnetism of the solar fluids, each of which, because of the combination of the force of attraction and the force leading to a sideways rotation, describes its own curving path, circular motion. These sorts of circles will intersect one another, something which their large scattering in the space leaves room for. That's beautifully described. Kant was truly the greatest philosopher in the Western world. To understand more about nebula, Gottfried de Brucker, in Fountain Source of Occultism, wrote about the nebula as well, and I think that his writing merits attention. If we look to page 118 and 119, let's see how Gottfried de Brucker describes the nebula as it develops within the cosmos. This is what he writes on page 118 in the first paragraph. Our solar system began in space, in the womb of a deity. So our solar system, corresponding to the fourth layer of the mundane egg, the womb of a deity, the sixth layer of the mundane egg. The eternal mother as a nebula, not by chance, but as one of the stages in its new embodiment. As this nebula slowly moved in space, at its heart there began to be a condensation of its substance. This condensation became the sun, and a little later at various points within that nebula, similar but smaller condensations of the nebular material occurred, and these became the planets. It couldn't be any more clear. If we turn over to 119, we'll take a look at G. Dupuy as he's using his inner eye to see the development of the nebula in the cosmos. He writes at the top in the first paragraph, "As we remain in thought on this highest plane through eons of cosmic time, our consciousness, having become an observer, grows cognizant of motion in the spirit substance around us. Likewise, this is the reason we see motion in Mula Prakriti, which we've been emphasizing throughout the talks in this channel. Similarly, we see motion in Aditi as the sixth layer of the mundane egg, which corresponds to the second logos as Mula Prakriti. The inner eye sees motion both because of the way Laya centers spit out material in a circular fashion. A mathematical point or center seems to be condensing, begins to glow with light and take unto itself movement in circular or rotary fashion, as well as movement of translation or progression." Finally, he continues, "As we watch in thought through the ages, we see the center become duplicated and multiplied elsewhere in the substance space around us. These other and apparently smaller foci doing just as the first point had done." Remember, substance space is consciousness as well as material elements. We begin to notice that the so-called empty space, it's not, it's consciousness, in which these various flashing points exist, itself becomes thoroughly active as spiritual substance. And as still other ages pass by in our thought, we realize that we are observing the condensation or formation of a spiritual nebula, or a sea of flaming but heatless spiritual fire in which the revolving points exist as living nuclei, each one formed around a Laya center. As time passes on, the spiritual nebula and all parts of it, both its fullness and the different nuclei, send emanations or flowing forces and substances from themselves down to the next lower plane of the body of Aditi, which plane in its turn is thus awakened by irregular serial stages to manifesting nebular life. This progressing descent continues steadily through emanation upon emanation, so that every plane of the body of Aditi, or the universe, in its turn becomes a field of space, or the stage of awakening existence and of innumerable living points, which are manifesting monads. Aditi being referred to the universe as the sixth layer of the mundane egg because the seventh layer actually surrounds and interpenetrates it all. And finally, we reach the physical stage, and we have a complete sevenfold nebular system evolving throughout the 7 layers of the mundane egg. These are incredible thoughts. They're very scientific, they're very complicated, but I hope this gives food for thought. Thank you so much. See you again.